My husband has a distant relative who is a pretty famous person. She's one of the world's leading scholars in a certain field, and she's a very famous professor at a university in the United States. And she comes maybe once a year to Israel to lecture at universities here. So she's here now visiting Israel. And usually when she comes, she meets with my husband. And I'd actually never met her. But this past week, I got an email from her asking if I would come and have breakfast with her. And at first I was very intimidated. I thought, you know, here's this famous intellectual, world-famous scholar. What could I possibly have to speak with about her? With her? But then, you know, I reluctantly agreed, and we met this morning for breakfast. And of course, I found she's an amazing lady, and she's also a mother. So of course, we had lots and lots to talk about. So she told me this story that I just had to share with you. She told me that, you know, in order to become a famous scholar, you have to work very, very hard in academia. So she said that when she was a young wife, she was working very hard and being a scholar, and she wasn't very interested in having children. So then at the age of 39, she decided the time had come. She had her first child. And it was good. She was happy to be a mother, but she continued in the same track, you know, very much focused on her scholarship and her work at the university. But then when she turned 43, she came to Israel for a sabbatical, and she was living on a religious kibbutz. And she was surrounded by all of these young mothers of young children, and she saw what a wonderful thing it was. And she said, you know, I want to be an imah. I also want to be a mommy. I want to be a mommy again, like these mothers of large families. So, but by then she had turned 44, and things weren't so simple, and it didn't go smoothly for her, and she wasn't able to have another child. So, she and her husband decided to go to South America to adopt a child there, and they found a child. And he was already 6 years old, and they brought him back to America. And she explained to me that when they first brought the child home, he seemed like sort of like a pretty regular child, and things were going pretty well. But as the years passed, things became extremely, extremely difficult. And she told me that it was the most traumatic thing she'd ever experienced raising this child. And she said that they had spent over the years hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapy bills. And the main issue, she explained, which is I think a fairly common issue for children who are adopted, is issues with attachment. They took the child to a psychologist who explained to our distant relative that children in their first few months, their first year of life, their personality is formed. And how is their personality formed? It's formed because of the attachment with the mother. A stable attachment and bonding with the mother. But this child, you know, the boy that they had adopted, at the age of 6, he didn't even know the words for mother and father in his native language. He had no images for what a mother and father were. And so the psychologist explained to them that this child had, and where his heart is, he had a black hole. So when I heard this, I mean, it's just so amazing just to think what mothers are doing. Like, let's say that there's a day that you didn't take the kids to the park, you didn't take them to the swimming pool, you didn't make cookies with them, you didn't really do much of anything, you were just hanging out and being a mom. But what you're doing, what all of us are doing just by being a regular mom, being just the mother figure, you know, even if you don't do anything special, what you're doing just by providing a stable home for your children and being a stable mother who's there for your children when they need you. So she told me this. So this is the end of the story. Is the whipped cream and cherry on the top. She said that on account of her experience, she totally underwent a whole transformation in her relationship to motherhood and the importance of motherhood. And she said that 2 years ago there was a young Israeli woman who was married, 35 years old, who was at the time finishing up her master's. But things were sort of dragging out, so she decided she was going to travel to America for 3 weeks to study at the university of our relative. So our relative helped the graduate student and was very successful, and the young Israeli woman finished her thesis. But on the last day of her stay in America, our relative sat the student down and said, "You know what? I've been helping you out with your studies, but there's something I have to tell you." She said, "I don't want you to make the same mistake that I made." Said, "You know, I've written a lot of books, and in my field, I've achieved a certain status. But I'll tell you something." She said, "The most important thing that a person can do in their lives is raise a good human being." So that graduate student traveled back to Israel, and 9 months later, she had a baby boy. And on this trip, our relative met with her former graduate student, and the graduate student said, "Here, I want you to meet your grandson." She said, "I want you to know that if you hadn't encouraged me and you hadn't spoken with me and told me the truth, then this baby wouldn't exist. Thank you." So I want to bless all of us. At this point in our lives, most of us aren't becoming, world-leading scholars in this or that, or world-leading anything in anything. But I want to bless all of us that, as we're dedicating ourselves to our homes and our families and being good mothers, filling up the black holes, filling our children with love and happiness and positive feelings, I want to bless all of us that we should remember that the most important thing that we can possibly do in the whole world, remind ourselves of the words of this wise woman, is raise a good human being, and I'll add, and good Jews.
לא ביקשה נפשי כי מגלותיה